For thousands of years, human intelligence has been our sharpest tool, building civilizations, decoding the universe, and shaping culture, language, and technology. From fire to flight, it's been our way of surviving and evolving. Yet today, something strange is happening. Despite living in an age overflowing with knowledge, data, and connection, more and more intelligent people report feeling deeply disconnected from the world around them. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where you had to hold back your thoughts, knowing they'd just be misunderstood or worse, dismissed? Have you ever looked around at what others seem to enjoy or value and thought, is it just me, or does none of this make sense? If so, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You might just be thinking on a different frequency. So if that really is you, don't skip this video, because today I'm going to show you the root of the problem. There's nothing wrong with having a brilliant, different mind. The issue isn't your intelligence. It's how you've been taught to use it. And at the end of this video, I'll share a way out, not through motivation or feel-good advice, but through a shift in strategic thinking. People with high cognitive ability often see patterns, connections, and inconsistencies that others overlook. They tend to ask why, when most people are content with what. They notice the undercurrents beneath social norms, question surface-level logic, and see flaws in systems that everyone else blindly accepts. But society doesn't often reward that kind of thinking. In fact, it can isolate it. This brings us to the concept of cognitive loneliness, a kind of isolation that doesn't come from being physically alone, but from rarely finding minds that resonate with your own. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people, yet feeling like you're speaking a different language. Studies have shown that individuals with higher IQs are more prone to feelings of disconnection, social anxiety, and even mild depression. It's not because they're emotionally weak. It's because they often don't have access to meaningful intellectual companionship. In the 1940s, psychologist Lewis Terman conducted a groundbreaking long-term study of children with exceptionally high IQs. He expected that these gifted kids would all grow up to become the world's top innovators, leaders, and thinkers. But that's not what happened. While some did excel, the majority lived relatively average lives. Not because they lacked potential, but because the system wasn't built to nurture their kind of thinking. Intelligence, it turns out, doesn't guarantee success or fulfillment, especially when it doesn't fit neatly into society's boxes. And those boxes are everywhere. Schools often prioritize conformity over creativity. Workplaces reward compliance over curiosity. Even social settings tend to favor emotional comfort over intellectual challenge. So the person who sees farther, feels deeper, or thinks more abstractly often learns to stay quiet or risk rejection. Philosophical and spiritual traditions have long recognized this struggle. In Buddhism, the path to enlightenment isn't paved with comfort. It begins with suffering. Those who awaken early often experience alienation. Before they find peace, they see through illusions that others still depend on, and that clarity can feel like a burden before it becomes a blessing. In this light, the journey of an intelligent mind in the modern world mirrors the path of early spiritual awakening, uncomfortable, lonely, but ultimately transformative. So if you've ever felt out of sync, maybe it's not that something's wrong with you. Maybe you're just awake in a world that's still half asleep. And that realization is the beginning of something powerful, not the end. And hey, if what I'm saying feels helpful to you, don't hesitate to drop a like and hit that subscribe button. It really motivates me to keep making more meaningful content. Let's get started. Have you ever heard of the Idiocracy Effect? It's a term inspired by the 2006 satirical movie Idiocracy, which imagined a future where human intelligence gradually declines, to the point where society is run by people who can barely form coherent thoughts. At the time, it was meant to be a comedy, an exaggerated warning wrapped in absurd humor. But almost 2 decades later, What was once a parody feels eerily close to reality. The Idiocracy Effect has become shorthand for a cultural shift, where, as technology and convenience accelerate, critical thinking, depth, and attention seem to be in freefall. This doesn't mean people are becoming dumber in the conventional sense. Many are still educated, tech-savvy, and capable in specialized areas. But something more subtle is happening. We're seeing a widespread decline in intellectual discipline. Mindless entertainment dominates digital spaces. Viral content wins over meaningful discussion. Emotional reaction often outweighs rational reflection. It's not that intelligence has disappeared, it's that the environment no longer rewards it. One of the clearest indicators comes from a 2015 study by Microsoft, which found that the average human attention span had dropped to just 8 seconds, less than that of a goldfish. Think about that. A goldfish. This isn't just a fun fact to throw into a conversation. It's a reflection of how our brains are being rewired. The endless stream of short-form videos, pop-up notifications, and dopamine-driven content trains us to constantly seek the next hit of stimulation. Anything that requires patience, focus, or complexity feels increasingly boring. Let's say you're reading a thoughtful article or watching a documentary. If you find yourself reaching for your phone midway or checking how much time is left, that's not a lack of interest. It's a byproduct of a brain trained to expect novelty every few seconds. Over time, that expectation makes it harder to tolerate stillness, think deeply, or stay with a difficult idea long enough to understand it. A big part of this is dopamine, our brain's reward chemical. Every swipe or new video gives us a tiny rush. Platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts are engineered around this. It's not that they're evil, but they are optimized to keep us hooked, not informed. You get a laugh, a surprise, a bit of drama, and then the next hit is just a scroll away. Feels good, but it comes at a cost. The erosion of our ability to stay present, to be bored, or to engage with anything that doesn't offer instant gratification. Some argue this shift is part of cultural evolution. We're becoming more emotionally tuned, more intuitive, more responsive. And in theory, that sounds promising. But in practice, what we're seeing isn't emotional intelligence. It's emotional manipulation. Algorithms prioritize content that provokes strong feelings: outrage, fear, envy. Why? Because it keeps us engaged. Rage clicks, panic shares, tribal thinking. These fuel the digital economy. Calm reflection doesn't go viral. This pattern isn't new. The Romans had a name for it: panem et circenses. Bread and circuses. Give the people cheap food and endless entertainment, and they won't protest. They won't question power. They'll stay distracted. Today's version? Food delivered by apps. Entertainment delivered 24/7 by algorithm. Same outcome, just more sophisticated tools. Take the example of a heated debate on social media. You might think you're seeing raw, passionate discourse, but what you're really watching is content curated to trigger you. It's not meant to resolve anything, just to keep you emotionally activated. Meanwhile, your ability to pause, analyze, and step back slowly fades. That leads us to a critical question. Is our ability to think clearly being traded for convenience and stimulation? Are we genuinely becoming more emotionally wise, or just more easily influenced? These questions aren't just theoretical. They affect how we vote, how we work, how we raise children, how we form relationships. The Idiocracy Effect isn't just about TikToks or memes. It's about the slow corrosion of mental independence. This doesn't mean we should reject all entertainment or avoid technology. Those things can be useful, even beautiful, but we have to be aware of what we consume, how it's shaping our minds, and when we're being pulled into passive, reaction-based thinking instead of active, conscious thought. Because once you know the game, you can choose how to play it. Picking up from the Idiocracy Effect, where attention is hijacked and emotion is manipulated, we can start to see a larger structure behind it all. It's not just random decline, it's systemic. In fact, what we're dealing with resembles a three-layered mechanism of intellectual control. It doesn't come with flashing warnings or obvious rules, but it shapes how we think, feel, and act every day. The first layer, misdirection. This is the flood of low-value content, what some call content pollution. It's the endless cycle of clickbait headlines, mind-numbing viral videos, and shallow hot takes. It distracts rather than informs. It amuses rather than challenges. On the surface, it might seem harmless, but over time, it erodes our ability to think critically or even care about complex issues. Clay Johnson's information diet model is a useful way to look at this. Just like junk food ruins physical health, junk content damages mental clarity. If we feed our minds nothing but empty, high-stimulation media, we become bloated with noise and starved of real knowledge. And it's not just about what we consume, it's also what we stop seeking. In a polluted information environment, it becomes harder to tell what's true, what's important, and what's worth our time. Our mental energy gets drained sifting through the noise. It's like trying to find clean drinking water in a muddy river. You'll probably give up and drink whatever's closest. That's how misdirection works. It doesn't have to lie. It just has to keep us too distracted to notice the truth. The second layer, psychological warfare. This one's deeper. It targets the way we perceive ourselves and others. Have you ever expressed concern or critical thought and been told, "You're overthinking it," or "Why are you always so serious?" That's a form of gaslighting, making you doubt your own judgment. When done on a large scale, it becomes a tool to suppress questioning and promote compliance. The Asch conformity experiment, 1951, showed how powerful group pressure can be. In the experiment, individuals were placed in a group where everyone else intentionally gave the wrong answer to a simple question. Over and over, participants would ignore what they knew was true, just to go along with the group. It wasn't about logic, it was about fitting in. That's exactly the kind of pressure we face now, especially online where social validation often outweighs independent thought. The system doesn't need to force obedience. It only needs to reward agreement and punish dissent. And the third layer, economic control. This is the most invisible but maybe the most powerful. It's the trap of constant busyness, the rat race. People work longer hours, take on multiple jobs, or hustle in a gig economy that glorifies exhaustion as ambition. But what's really happening is that people are kept so preoccupied with survival that they have no bandwidth left for reflection or resistance. The economic system, in many cases, ensures we stay stuck at the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: safety, security, and basic comfort. That's no accident, because once you're caught in a cycle of rent, bills, and deadlines, you stop asking deeper questions. Self-actualization, the top of Maslow's pyramid, where creativity, growth, and purpose live, becomes a luxury few can afford. The system doesn't need to stop you from reaching your potential. It just has to keep you tired. Each of these three layers, misdirection, psychological conditioning, and economic exhaustion, works together to dull the edges of independent thought. One distracts, one manipulates, one drains. On their own, they might not seem insidious, but together they form a framework that keeps people intellectually passive, emotionally reactive, and too tired to challenge the status quo. And that brings us back to the bigger picture. The issue isn't that people are incapable of thinking clearly. It's that the environment makes it increasingly harder to do so. In a world that rewards distraction, punishes nonconformity, and demands constant output, protecting your mind becomes a radical act. Imagine a curious child in class who keeps asking, "Why?" instead of just memorizing the answers. First, it's charming, but soon the teacher gets impatient, the other students roll their eyes, and eventually the child is told to stop interrupting. That's a small moment, but it reflects something much bigger. Intelligence, especially when it questions norms, is often unwelcome. Why? Because deep thinking disrupts stability. Societies, institutions, and systems, whether government, corporate, or educational, are built to maintain order. And order depends on predictability. Creative, critical minds don't just ask different questions. They challenge the assumptions that hold the whole structure together. And that's uncomfortable. From a systems perspective, it's easier to manage people who follow instructions than people who question them. Schools reward compliance. Workplaces value efficiency. Governments prefer citizens who consume and obey. In this context, intelligence becomes less of an asset and more of a liability, unless it can be harnessed in very narrow, controlled ways. The goal isn't to produce thinkers. The goal is to produce predictable agents, individuals who function smoothly within the system without disrupting it. That's why you'll often find that intelligence is tolerated, only when it plays by the rules. But when it starts breaking them, when it gets too honest, too visionary, or too unconventional, it's pushed to the margins. Look at the track record. Nikola Tesla died penniless, dismissed as a madman. Osho was exiled and demonized for challenging spiritual and political structures. Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake for proposing ideas that now form the foundation of modern cosmology. These weren't criminals. They were thinkers who saw too far ahead and paid the price for it. Even in the modern world, where innovation is supposedly celebrated, there's a quiet hostility toward disruptive intelligence. Steve Jobs, now a tech icon, was once fired from Apple, his own company, because he was too difficult. That wasn't about incompetence. It was about incompatibility with the corporate structure. Many high IQ individuals today report being sidelined in professional environments, not because they lack skill, but because they don't conform easily. They ask too many questions, resist shallow thinking, and don't thrive in bureaucratic cultures designed for sameness. This leads us to a controversial question. Are we living in a civilization that actively resists cognitive evolution? It's a tough one. On the surface, we see progress. More universities, advanced technology, endless access to information. But under that surface, there's also a strong push to standardize thought, to reduce people to metrics, to shape education into test preparation, to prioritize emotional comfort over intellectual challenge. It's a culture where complexity is seen as threatening, where depth is mistaken for arrogance, and where thinking differently is often punished, not praised. And the irony? We need disruptive thinkers more than ever. In a world facing ecological collapse, political instability, and rapid technological change, fresh thinking isn't optional. It's essential. But the very systems that need these minds are also the ones suppressing them. Rejecting intelligence isn't always obvious. It doesn't always come with censorship or punishment. Sometimes it's just exclusion, a job offer that never comes, a funding application that gets denied, a classroom where questions are ignored. The cost of independent thought is often isolation. But still, some choose it, and thank them for it. Every breakthrough in science, art, or philosophy has come from someone who refused to shut up, sit down, or fall in line. They paid the price, so others could think more freely. So the next time intelligence makes things uncomfortable, instead of asking, why are they being so difficult? Maybe ask, what structure is being protected here? Because often, it's not stupidity that keeps society stuck. It's fear of what intelligence might change. If intelligence alone isn't enough to thrive, especially in a world that often resists it, then what's the missing piece? That's where leverage comes in. Because thinking clearly is vital, but without power behind it, it often goes unheard, ignored, or buried. The solution isn't to think less. It's to think smarter with leverage. The first shift is to stop waiting for permission. Too often, people with great minds hold back because they think they need validation before they act. Approval from institutions, gatekeepers, or the masses. But the truth is, no one recognizes your value until you do. Elon Musk is a striking example. For years, he was mocked by the media, dismissed by experts, and doubted even by his peers. SpaceX was seen as a fantasy, Tesla a joke. But Musk didn't wait for the world to believe in him. He built until they had no choice. That's self-recognition as leverage. It's choosing to lead rather than be chosen. You stop asking, "Am I allowed?" and start deciding, "This matters, so I'm doing it." Then comes the second layer, understanding and applying real-world leverage. Intelligence is multiplied when it connects to the right tools, systems, and people. Financial leverage, for example, means turning money into freedom, whether through smart investing, starting a scalable business, or building income that isn't tied to your hours. It's not about wealth for status, but for autonomy. If your basic survival is covered, you can think freely, act boldly, and take risks others can't. Time leverage is just as powerful. The smartest thinkers don't spend their lives in the weeds. They automate, delegate, and use technology to do the heavy lifting. If your day is consumed by repetitive tasks, there's no room for deep thought or bold moves. Automating work, using AI, building systems, these aren't just productivity hacks. They're what creates space for creativity and strategy. And don't overlook social leverage. This isn't about being popular. It's about being connected to the right people in the right way. Ideas spread through networks. Opportunities come through trust. Influence is built over time, through positioning, alignment, and strategic presence. You don't have to be everywhere. You just need to be known in the right places by the right people. Social capital, when earned and used wisely, can move mountains. But the deepest level of leverage, rewriting the game itself, escaping the matrix, isn't just a meme, it's a mindset. It means refusing to live by scripts written for you. You don't have to climb someone else's ladder, play someone else's game, or chase success by rules you didn't create. Friedrich Nietzsche said it best. He who creates new values is the true holy man. Real impact comes not from following old morality, but from building new visions. Not rebelling for the sake of it, but crafting an entirely new standard. That's why leverage isn't just practical, it's philosophical. It's about living with intent, not inertia. Intelligence without leverage is like a sharp sword in a locked room. Dangerous but stuck. Leverage is what opens the door. It gives your ideas movement. It makes your thoughts count. So don't just be smart. Be smart with power. Build something you believe in. Stand for something bigger than comfort. And use every tool you can to amplify your voice. The world won't give you a megaphone. You'll have to build your own. If leverage is the engine that moves intelligence forward, then energy is the fuel that keeps it running. And not just physical energy, but total integrated energy, body, mind, and emotion. Without managing this energy well, even the sharpest mind and smartest strategy will eventually stall. Let's start with the body. It's easy to forget, especially in intellectual circles, that the brain is a physical organ. It doesn't float in some abstract cloud. It runs on blood flow, oxygen, hormones, and chemical signals. One of the clearest connections between physical health and mental performance comes from BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a protein that supports the growth of new neurons and strengthens neural connections, directly enhancing learning and memory. And how do you boost BDNF? Regular physical exercise, cardio, strength training, even a brisk walk. These aren't just about fitness. They're acts of brain optimization. A healthy body literally creates a smarter brain. But physical energy is just the baseline. What really sets top performers apart is mental energy, the ability to focus deeply and stay locked into meaningful work. In a world built for distraction, this is a rare and powerful skill. Cal Newport calls it deep work, the ability to concentrate without interruption on cognitively demanding tasks. It's not just about working harder, it's about working in a state where your mind operates at its full potential. That means cutting out noise, setting boundaries, and training your brain like a muscle to resist the pull of constant stimulation. Every notification you ignore, every uninterrupted hour you claim, is a step toward intellectual mastery. But even deep focus can break down if emotional energy is mismanaged. This is the trickiest layer because emotions are invisible, but they drive everything. One of the biggest energy drains is the need for external validation, the craving to be liked, approved, and praised by people who, honestly, might not even understand what you're trying to do. This emotional dependence is subtle but dangerous. It makes you play small, dilute your vision, or constantly adjust yourself to fit in with the average. And here's the truth. The average person isn't equipped to judge your potential. Most people evaluate based on their own limitations, not your possibilities. If you base your self-worth on their opinions, you tie your growth to their comfort zone. That's not just a waste of emotional energy, it's a trap. Managing emotional energy means letting go of that need. It means building a sense of inner confidence that doesn't rely on applause. It's about doing the work because it matters to you, because it's aligned with your values, your mission, your standard. Emotional sovereignty is what allows you to move forward without being derailed by doubt, hate, or misunderstanding. When all three energies, physical, mental, emotional, are aligned and well managed, something powerful happens. Your actions become sharper, your decisions clearer, your resilience stronger. It's not about becoming superhuman. It's about reclaiming the full range of energy that's already available to you, but often scattered or blocked. So as you build leverage and pursue a path of independent thinking, don't forget to protect the source. Your energy isn't infinite, but it is renewable if you treat it like your most valuable asset, because it is. Once your energy is aligned, physically, mentally, emotionally, the next step isn't just to survive in the current system. It's to step outside of it and start creating your own. Because at a certain point, high-level thinking can't thrive in low-resolution environments. The goal is not rebellion for its own sake. It's reinvention. It's choosing to live by design, not by default. The first step in this shift is finding your tribe. That might sound abstract, but it's deeply practical. There's a real phenomenon known as the loneliness of the gifted, the experience of people with sharp minds and strong values, feeling isolated in a world that doesn't reflect them. It's not arrogance, it's mismatch. The friction comes from living in an environment that runs on different priorities, where depth is dismissed and complexity is uncomfortable. But this changes the moment you meet others who think in high resolution, people who don't just react to the world, but consciously shape it. In these circles, conversations aren't about gossip or distraction. They're about strategy, philosophy, experimentation. The air feels different. You don't have to shrink yourself. You expand. These communities exist, sometimes in niche forums, mastermind groups, online platforms, or tight in-person circles. And they aren't always easy to find. But once you do, you realize something. It's not that you were too much. You were just in the wrong room. Next, to fully escape the system, financial independence isn't just helpful. It's essential. As long as your survival depends on trading time for money, your creative and intellectual freedom is limited. You'll always be making decisions through the lens of risk aversion, always calculating what you can't say or shouldn't do. The way out isn't winning the rat race, it's exiting it entirely. That means shifting into ownership, creating something that works for you, while you sleep, while you rest, while you think. Could be a product, a system, a brand, an asset, anything that generates value beyond your direct labor. This isn't about passive income fantasies. It's about leverage. It's about designing a structure where your brain isn't stuck solving short-term problems all day, but can zoom out, explore, invent. Take Naval Ravikant's model as an example. He speaks about productizing yourself so that your work scales beyond you. That's not reserved for tech founders. A writer who owns their distribution, a creator who builds a loyal audience, a freelancer who turns their skill into a course or tool. They're all doing it. They're trading dependence for design. But even that's not the final step. Because once you've found your people and freed your time, the real power comes in understanding and shaping systems. This is where most people, even highly intelligent ones, get stuck. They stay focused on the parts, not the whole. They master tactics, but miss the bigger game. System thinking is the ability to see interconnections. How economic structures shape culture. How algorithms drive public opinion. How incentives move behavior. Seeing how invisible rules produce visible outcomes. Without this lens, you'll always feel like something's wrong, but won't know where to push. Let's take a small but powerful example. Food deserts in urban areas. At first glance, it looks like poor neighborhoods just have fewer grocery stores. But zoom out, and you'll see a whole system. Supply chains, zoning laws, corporate interests, generational poverty. It's not just one broken piece. It's a design that produces exactly what it's meant to. The same is true for media bias, education gaps, even productivity culture. If you don't learn to read the system, you'll spend your life reacting instead of reshaping. That's why escaping the system isn't about hiding in the woods or rejecting society. It's about becoming conscious of the game you're in, and then building your own version. It starts with finding aligned minds. It expands through owning your time and output, and it matures into designing systems that reflect your values, not just your goals. It's not easy, but it's possible, and it's happening. Across the world, small nodes of thinkers, builders, and creators are unplugging from outdated models and launching their own realities. The more that connect, the more the old system becomes irrelevant, not by force but by evolution. So if you've ever felt out of place, boxed in, or underutilized, maybe that wasn't your failure. Maybe it was your signal, the call to stop fitting into a broken design and start building something that fits you. Have you seen pieces of yourself in what we've just walked through? Maybe you've felt the pressure to fit in, to mute your ideas, to trade focus for convenience. Maybe you've questioned why deep thinking feels like a burden instead of a strength, or why the system seems built for compliance, not clarity. If any of that hit home, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not wrong for feeling it. Because here's the truth. Intelligence by itself isn't enough. Not in a system that doesn't know how to value it. What gives intelligence real power isn't approval or a diploma or a title. It's awareness. It's when you wake up to the fact that no one is coming to unlock your potential for you. No institution, no company, no culture is built to empower your full mind. That's your job. Escaping the matrix isn't about fighting the world. It's not some dramatic war. It's about quietly unplugging from mental noise, emotional manipulation, and systems that want your obedience more than your growth. It's about realizing you don't need to be accepted by a game you were never meant to play. So here's the final question. Will you keep playing a game that was never designed for you, or will you start writing your own? If this message spoke to something real in you, don't just scroll past it. Drop a like. It helps this reach others who need to hear it too. Subscribe if you want to keep sharpening your mind and stepping further outside the noise. And most importantly, keep thinking, not just for the system, but for yourself.